Hey guys, tonight we are pulling back the velvet curtain of time to step into the absolute weirdness of the medieval bedroom. You're not just climbing into a four-poster bed with a memory foam topper. You're stepping into a world where the night is a different country, a vast, dark, and deeply strange territory. Picture this: the last ember in the hearth gutters out, plunging your one-room home into a blackness so complete you can taste it, a thick, woolly silence broken only by the scuttling of something in the thatch above your head. The air is cold, and it smells of wood smoke, damp earth, and the faint, unsettling aroma of the livestock dozing just a few feet away. You settle onto a scratchy straw mattress, sharing body heat with your entire family, and you wait. This is not the simple, 8-hour oblivion we modern folk chase with melatonin and white noise machines. This is an active, segmented, and sometimes terrifying journey. You probably won't survive this, not just because of the plague or the questionable dentistry, but because your 21st century brain would simply short-circuit from the nocturnal reality of the year 1350. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from and what the local time is, so feel free to post your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first sleep begins not long after the sun vanishes, a heavy, dreamless crash into oblivion born from a day of pure physical labor. You've been hauling water, tilling fields, or hammering metal since dawn, and your body has no patience for tossing and turning. You sink into a profound slumber for 3, maybe 4 hours. But then, something shifts. You awaken. Not to an alarm, not to a child's cry, but to a natural, expected middle-of-the-night consciousness. This is your first sleep, complete. For the next hour or two, you are awake, and this wakefulness is not a nuisance to be fought with scrolling on a phone. It is a time of profound quiet, of intimacy, of contemplation, and of weirdness. This is the watch, a pocket of time suspended between two sleeps. What do you do during this nocturnal intermission? Pretty much anything. You might lie there in the dark, talking softly with your spouse or the sibling lying next to you, having conversations that feel different, more confessional, under the cloak of absolute privacy that only the deep night can provide. You might get up to check on the animals, add a log to the fire, or relieve yourself. But this is also prime time for prayer. The church taught that specific hours of the night were holy, and rising to pray during this time was seen as a particularly potent way to commune with God, a direct hotline when the rest of the world was still. Historians still argue whether this segmented sleep pattern was a biological inevitability in a world without artificial light or a culturally constructed rhythm that people simply accepted as the natural order of things. But it wasn't all pious whispers and marital chats. This was also the time for what we might euphemistically call marital relations, believed by many medieval medical texts to be more likely to result in conception during this restful, post-first sleep period. It was a time for interpreting dreams from that first sleep, which were thought to be more prophetic before the rational mind of full wakefulness cluttered them up. You might even have a small, simple snack, a piece of bread, a sip of ale, to tide you over until morning. This wasn't insomnia. This was just night. A second, quieter, more intimate day nestled inside the dark. And then there are the visitors. As you lie there in that hazy state between your first and second sleep, the boundaries between reality and fantasy, faith and fear, become dangerously thin. This is when the creatures of the night are most active. You don't just fear burglars. You fear things with glowing eyes and cold hands. The mainstream historical fact here is the pervasive, bone-deep belief in the supernatural after dark. The village priest would have told you, in no uncertain terms, that demons and malevolent spirits roamed freely once the sun was down. But the quirky, fringe tidbit is the specific, household name terror of the incubus and succubus. These weren't vague spooks. They were detailed, sexualized demons believed to physically visit people in their beds, sitting on their chests, causing a feeling of suffocation and paralysis, and engaging in, well, unspeakable acts. That feeling of being awake but unable to move, which we now call sleep paralysis, had a very specific, and very terrifying diagnosis in the Middle Ages. You were being preyed upon by a night demon. So you take precautions. Maybe you've placed a piece of cold iron under your mattress, or you've woven St. John's wort into a small charm hanging above the bed. Every creak of the house, every hoot of an owl, is a potential herald of something otherworldly. Your night is not a blank space. It's a canvas upon which your deepest fears and your most private moments are painted. After an hour or so of this wakefulness, the pull of sleep becomes irresistible again. You settle back into the straw, the warmth of the bodies around you a comfort against the spiritual chill of the night, and you drift into your second sleep, a lighter, often more dream-filled slumber that carries you through until the first gray light of dawn begins to finger its way through the cracks in the shutters, and the world, for a little while, feels safe again. That second sleep finally releases you, not to the gentle chirping of birds, but to the pervasive damp chill that has seeped into your very bones overnight. You don't spring out of bed. You untangle yourself, your muscles stiff, your back complaining from a night on a surface that would give a modern chiropractor nightmares. And as you blink the grit from your eyes, the reality of your sleeping arrangements comes fully into focus. Let's talk about the bed itself, because it's so much more than a piece of furniture. It's a statement, a fortress, and a petri dish, all in one. You're not lying on a sprung mattress with a thread count. You're on a bag of stuffed, dried vegetation. Sometimes it's straw, which is prickly and loud. Sometimes it's hay, which is a bit softer but comes with its own ecosystem of tiny, crawling inhabitants. If you're slightly more well off, it might be wool flock or even dried pea stalks, which crackle with every movement. The mainstream historical fact here is the sheer universality of the bed as the single most important, and often most expensive, household item after the hearth. For most people, this mattress, called a tick or a palliasse, lies directly on the floor, or on a simple wooden platform to keep it away from the drafts and the occasional wandering chicken. But if you're of a higher social standing, your bed is a world unto itself. Imagine a massive wooden frame, so heavy it feels like a part of the building structure. From it hang thick, heavy curtains, not for romantic ambience, but for sheer survival. These drapes are your primary defense against the cold, drawn tightly at night to create a sealed, stuffy cocoon where your own body heat can, hopefully, build up to a tolerable level. Inside this fabric-walled room, you're still sharing the space. Your entire family, parents, children, maybe even a visiting cousin or servant, is piled in together for warmth. Privacy, as we understand it, simply doesn't exist. You sleep in a knot of limbs, listening to the symphony of snores and sleep talk, the scent of unwashed bodies and the lingering aroma of last night's pottage thick in the enclosed air. And the linens? This is where status truly plays out, a quiet, domestic drama of social climbing. The mattress itself might be scratchy, but the sheets are a different story. Linen, woven from flax, is the gold standard. The more linen you have, and the finer its weave, the richer you are. You might have a bottom sheet, a top sheet, and if you're truly living in luxury, a separate blanket or a fur coverlet. Your neighbors, the ones you hear arguing through the wattle and daub walls, might only have a single, coarse woolen blanket they all huddle under. The quirky tidbit here involves the bizarre, and frankly horrifying, materials sometimes used for bedding by the less fortunate. Historical accounts and household inventories sometimes mention bedding stuffed with everything from dried seaweed to, well, human hair collected from barber surgeons. Imagine trying to drift off to the scent of salty, rotting kelp, or knowing the cushion beneath you was once on someone else's head. But the bed's function doesn't end at sleeping. During the day, this large, sturdy platform becomes the stage for life itself. It's the family sofa, the place you receive important guests while propped up on pillows. Business deals are struck, marriage contracts are negotiated, all from the comfort of your bed. It's the sick bay, the place where you're born and where, most likely, you'll draw your last breath. The bed is the heart of the household, a multi-purpose piece of engineering that has to do it all. And remember those heavy curtains? They also serve as a crucial barrier against prying eyes and, the occasional flying insect. Historians still argue whether the Great Bed of Ware, a massive English bed from the 16th century built to sleep at least 4 couples, was a genuine in fixture or more of a tourist attraction, a piece of proto-novelty furniture designed to draw gawkers. And speaking of beds and their contents, let's talk about your other bedfellows, the ones you didn't invite. No matter your social class, you are not sleeping alone. You are sharing your space with fleas, lice, and bedbugs. The constant, low-level itching is just a fact of life. You might try to fight back with herbal sachets of lavender or mint tucked into the bedding, but it's a losing battle. In the dead of night, you can feel them marching, a tiny, persistent army claiming your skin as their territory. It adds a whole new layer of meaning to the term, restless night. You shift, you scratch, you squirm, all while trying not to disturb the 5 other people snoring next to you. This isn't a place of serene rest. It's a crowded, itchy, and often aromatic ecosystem where the line between the human and the animal, the clean and the unclean, is blurred beyond recognition. It's a world where the bed is the center of the universe, a stage for every human drama, from birth to death, and a nightly battle against an invisible, 6-legged enemy. As you lie there in that itchy, crowded darkness, scratching at the latest flea bite, your mind begins to play tricks on you. The rational, sunlit part of your brain has gone to sleep, but the ancient, fearful part is wide awake and listening. Every groan of the timber frame isn't just the house settling, it's a footstep. Every rustle in the straw isn't just a mouse, it's something worse, something deliberate. This is the hour of the demons. The Church's teachings on the perils of the night weren't just abstract theology. They were a nightly reality, a map for navigating a world literally haunted by invisible, malevolent forces. Your fear isn't a disorder. It's a logical response to your environment. The most famous of these nocturnal terrors, as you'll remember from our first sleep, were the Incubus and the Succubus. But they were just the lieutenants in a vast, shadowy army. The mainstream historical fact here is the deeply ingrained, pan-European belief in a host of sleep-disrupting, soul-threatening supernatural entities. These weren't just stories to tell around the fire. They were explanations for very real, very terrifying physical experiences. Sleep paralysis, that feeling of being awake but trapped in an unresponsive body, was not a neurological glitch. It was a spiritual assault. The sensation of a heavy weight on your chest was literal. It was the incubus sitting on you, and the accompanying feeling of suffocation was its way of stealing your breath, your life force. The shadowy figures seen at the foot of the bed? Those were its minions. But let's get into the quirky, fringe tidbit, the creature that truly encapsulates the medieval blend of folklore and sheer, pants-wetting terror, the mare. This is where we get the word nightmare. But a mare wasn't a bad dream, it was a specific, monstrous being. Originating from Germanic folklore, the mare was often depicted as a haggard, old woman, or sometimes a malevolent spirit, who would ride on the chests of sleepers, bringing them dreadful, suffocating dreams. The word itself is linked to roots meaning to crush or to press. She was the physical embodiment of that crushing pressure. People would hang fishing nets or iron implements near their beds, believing the mare, a supernatural creature, would be compelled to count the holes in the net or be repelled by the iron before she could reach them, a desperate attempt to logic their way out of pure terror. And the consequences of these visitations were not just a bad night's sleep. A visit from an incubus or a mare could be blamed for everything from sleepwalking and night terrors in children to sleep apnea and even sudden death in the middle of the night. If a person, particularly a woman, exhibited strange behavior, spoke in tongues, or had fits, the diagnosis was often supernatural. The line between a sleep disorder and demonic possession was so thin as to be non-existent. This is where the scholarly debate gets intense. Historians still argue whether the widespread belief in these entities was a top-down imposition by the Church to control nocturnal behavior and enforce piety, or a bottom-up folk belief that the Church simply co-opted and Christianized, swapping older, pagan spirits for demons and saints. Your defense against this nightly siege was a mix of prayer and folk magic. You'd whisper the name of the Virgin Mary or clutch a crucifix. But you'd also hang that piece of cold iron, or keep a knife under the pillow, or place your shoes by the bed with the toes pointing away from you. A charm believed to confuse the demons and lead them astray. Before you drift back into your second sleep, your mind is a whirlwind of recited prayers and superstitious rituals. You're not just fighting for rest, you're fighting for your very soul. The dark isn't empty, it's crowded, and it's watching you. And in that fragile, wakeful hour between sleeps, you are your own, terrified exorcist, armed with nothing but faith, folklore, and the desperate hope that the morning will come before something in the shadows decides to make its presence permanently known. So, how do you armor yourself against an army of invisible, chest-crushing night mares? You don't just rely on prayer and cold iron. You turn to the earth, to a pharmacy of roots, leaves, and flowers whose secrets have been passed down through generations. This is the world of medieval sleep aids, a blend of practical herbalism, outright magic, and a few things that would make a modern pharmacist scratch their head in bewilderment. After all, when the enemy is a demon that sits on your sternum, a simple cup of chamomile tea just isn't going to cut it. Your first line of defense is the sleepy posy, a small sachet of herbs you tuck inside your pillow or hang above your bed. This is where mainstream historical fact and quirky folk remedy collide beautifully. Lavender is a staple, its calming scent as recognizable to you as it is to us. You might also use chamomile, valued for its gentle sedative properties, or rose petals for their comforting fragrance. But then we get to the more aggressive ingredients. Vervain, known as the herb of enchantment, is a must-have for its supposed power to ward off evil spirits. And then there's St. John's wort. You know it, you've probably hung it over your bed since we last talked about the incubus. But its use goes beyond demon repellent. It was also called fuga demonum, the demon's flight, and was believed to bring comfort and peaceful dreams, a literal light in the metaphorical darkness. But sometimes, you need something stronger than a scented bag. This is where you venture into the realm of potions and infusions. A warm, milky drink infused with poppy tears, that's opium, is the heavy artillery for sleeplessness, a powerful and dangerously addictive remedy known to physicians and cunning folk alike. Henbane, another potent and toxic plant, might be used in minute doses, but getting the measurement wrong could mean you never wake up. The line between a sleeping draught and a fatal poison was perilously thin. The quirky tidbit here involves a truly bizarre recipe, a sleep-inducing ointment made from hemlock, opium, and sometimes even the fat of a freshly killed animal, rubbed onto the temples or elsewhere. Some texts suggest applying these potent salves to the more sensitive, mucous membrane-rich areas of the body for faster absorption, a delivery method that was as effective as it was reckless. And it's not just about falling asleep, it's about the quality of your sleep. This is where we cross from herbalism into oneiromancy, the art of dream interpretation and manipulation. You don't just want to sleep, you want to have the right kind of dreams. Prophetic dreams were highly sought after. To encourage them, you might sleep with a specific crystal, like moonstone, under your pillow. You might eat certain foods before bed, or avoid others. There were elaborate rituals involving writing a question on a bay leaf and placing it in your shoe before you slept, hoping for an answer in your dreams. Historians still argue whether these dream manipulation practices were remnants of pre-Christian pagan traditions or a natural human impulse to find meaning and control in the chaotic theater of the subconscious mind, an impulse the Church alternately condemned and co-opted. The goal of all this, the posies, the potions, the dream charming, wasn't just unconsciousness. It was to create a state of grace, a protected slumber where your body could rest, your mind could receive divine or prophetic messages, and your soul would be safe from the things that went bump in the night. You are not a passive participant in your sleep. You are its curator, its alchemist, mixing a delicate brew of botany and belief in your quest for a single, peaceful night. It's a high-stakes game, where the prize is rest and the penalty for a mistake could be a toxic delirium or a visit from something your herbal sachet couldn't keep out. So you measure your poppy tears carefully, you knot your St. John's wort just so, and you hope that tonight, the only thing riding you is a good dream. Now, let's pull the camera back from your itchy, herb-strewn, demon-haunted bed and look at the rest of the house. Because for a huge portion of the medieval population, the concept of a bedroom is a laughable luxury. You don't have one. You sleep in the main room, the hall, the one single space that serves as your kitchen, dining room, workshop, and nursery. And you are not alone there. Your bed, if you have a designated one, is just one island in a sea of slumbering bodies. Your siblings are on a pallet by the fire. Your parents are in their bed. The servant, if you have one, is curled up on a bench. The family dog, the cat that keeps the mice down, they're all in here, adding their breath and their scent to the thick, warm, profoundly communal atmosphere of the night. This is the reality of public sleeping. Privacy is not just scarce. It's a concept that barely exists, as foreign as a silent night. The mainstream historical fact here is the sheer ubiquity of communal living and sleeping, especially for the lower and middle classes. The entire household, a unit that included not just blood relatives but often apprentices, servants, and even visiting strangers, slept in close, intimate proximity. Walls are thin, if they exist at all. You don't just hear your father snore. You hear the neighbor's father snore through the wattle and daub. You are constantly aware of the sounds and smells of other human beings, a constant, low-level sensory input that would likely overwhelm our modern sensibilities, which are accustomed to sealed rooms and silence. But let's climb the social ladder, out of your smoky, single-room home and into the stone embrace of a castle. Surely, here, in these vast halls and chambers, people get some privacy, right? Wrong. The castle at night is a different kind of communal space, but a communal one nonetheless. The Great Hall is a dormitory. Knights, men-at-arms, visiting dignitaries, and all their various hangers-on would unroll their bedding on the floor after the tables were cleared from the evening meal. They would sleep side by side in a scene of organized chaos, a cacophony of snores and muttered conversations in half a dozen languages. The lord and his immediate family might have private chambers, but even these were often shared. The lord's chamber was a place of business by day and a shared bedroom by night, with servants or guards often sleeping on a pallet at the foot of the lord's own bed, or just outside the door. The notion of a child having their own room is almost unheard of. They sleep with siblings, nurses, or in their parents' chamber until they are practically adults. This leads to the quirky, fringe tidbit of castle sleep, the politics of the bedchamber. Where you slept was a direct reflection of your status and your relationship to the powerful. Being invited to sleep in the Lord's chamber was a mark of high favor and trust. It was also a practical security measure. But this proximity bred a strange informality. You would have witnessed your lord in his nightshirt, heard his private conversations, seen him in his most vulnerable state. This intimacy was a double-edged sword. It could foster fierce loyalty, but it could also be a source of tension and intrigue. Historians still argue whether this enforced closeness in the medieval household was a practical response to the challenges of heating and security, or a deliberate social tool used to reinforce hierarchies and bonds of fealty through constant, unblinking familiarity. And then there are the sounds. Oh, the sounds. In your one-room home or in the castle hall, the night is not silent. It's a symphony of human and animal existence. Beyond the snoring and the rustling, there's the coughing, the muttering, the crying of a baby, the creak of a floorboard as someone gets up to use the chamber pot. You hear the soft, secret conversations of couples, the sleepy complaints of children, the murmured prayers of the devout. You are never, ever alone with your thoughts. Your night is a shared experience, a collective journey through the dark hours. It forges a certain kind of resilience, a blunt familiarity with the raw, unvarnished reality of other people's lives. There is no filter, no pretense. The night strips everyone down to their most basic self, a tired, vulnerable, dreaming animal huddled together for warmth and safety in a world that is, more often than not, very cold and very dark. In this world where the night is a shared, semi-conscious journey, the dreams that visit you during your first and second sleep are not just random neurological static. They are messages. They are diagnoses. They are prophecies waiting to be decoded. And for that, you need a translator. You don't just wake up, shrug off a weird dream about a two-headed cow, and go about your day. That dream could mean a coming famine, a neighbor's betrayal, or that your bad knee is about to get worse. In the absence of modern psychology and medical science, the landscape of your own mind is a foreign country, and you need a guide to navigate it. You need a sleep teller. This is the world of oniromancy, and its practitioners range from the village wise woman to respected physicians and even monks. The mainstream historical fact is the near-universal belief, stretching back to antiquity and fully embraced in the Middle Ages, that dreams held significant meaning about one's physical health, spiritual state, and future fate. Medical texts, like those of the ancient Greek physician Galen, which were the standard for centuries, taught that dreams could reveal bodily imbalances. A dream of raging fires might indicate an excess of choler, or yellow bile, in your system. Dreams of flying could point to an overabundance of the airy, sanguine humor. Your subconscious was a diagnostic tool, if you knew how to read it. But the interpretation itself is where we get into the quirky, fringe tidbit, the dream dictionary. Imagine a book, often called a Somnial Danielis or Dream Book of Daniel, which claimed the authority of the biblical prophet. It was a literal A to Z guide to dream symbolism, and its interpretations could be wildly specific and often contradictory. In one, dreaming of a white horse might mean good fortune is on the way. In another, it could predict a death in the family. If you dream of bees, you might gain wealth. If you dream of losing a tooth, prepare for the loss of a family member. Dreaming of eating sweet, ripe fruit? Excellent, all is well. Dreaming of eating rotten meat? Beware of false friends and hidden illnesses. You'd consult these books, or the local dream interpreter who had its contents memorized, with the same earnestness we might consult a doctor's lab results today. And it wasn't just about passive interpretation, it was about active solicitation. This is where the practice bleeds into the magical. People engaged in rituals to invite specific, prophetic dreams, a practice known as incubating a dream. This wasn't the biological first sleep we discussed earlier, but a deliberate, ritualistic act. You might travel to a holy site, like a saint's shrine, and sleep there, hoping the saint would appear in your dream with a cure for your ailments or an answer to your prayers. You might perform a specific chant, hold a particular stone, or sleep on a bare skin, all in the hopes of steering your dreaming mind towards a divine revelation. Historians still argue whether the widespread belief in prophetic dreams was a tool for the powerless to find agency in an uncertain world, or a mechanism for the powerful, including the Church, to reinforce their authority by controlling the narrative of what certain dreams meant. The sleep teller, then, holds a position of subtle power. They are the gatekeepers of the subconscious, the ones who can transform a confusing nocturnal vignette into a plan of action, a warning, or a divine mandate. When you wake, heart pounding, from a vivid dream, you don't just dismiss it. You turn it over and over in your mind, searching for the hook, the clue, the message buried within the symbolism. You might even, if the dream is troubling enough, take a handful of eggs or a measure of grain to the old woman at the edge of the village and ask her what it means. Your inner life is not a private sanctuary. It's a public text, written in a cryptic language that everyone believes is worth deciphering, because the message might just save your life, your soul, or your harvest. While you and your neighbors are navigating your segmented sleeps and decoding your dreams, a very different kind of nocturnal rhythm is being enforced just a stone's throw away, within the cold, stone walls of the local monastery. Here, the night is not a time for private contemplation or family chats. It is a meticulously scheduled, collective assault on sin and sloth, governed by the relentless ringing of bells. The Church didn't just have opinions on sleep, it sought to regiment it, to carve the divine into the very fabric of time, and in doing so, it waged a quiet war against the natural human desire for a full, unbroken night's rest. The engine of this regimentation was the Liturgy of the Hours, also known as the Divine Office. This was a series of 8 prayer services that punctuated the day and night. For monks, nuns, and the clergy, sleep was not a single block of time to be enjoyed, but a series of intervals between devotions. The mainstream historical fact here is the profound influence this monastic schedule had on the broader medieval concept of time. The monastery bell was the town clock, its rhythms dictated the working day for many, and its nightly tolling was a constant reminder that even in the deepest dark, someone was awake, praying on your behalf. Now, let's get specific, because the names of these nighttime services are poetry in themselves. Your second sleep is brutally cut short by the bell for nocturnes, or matins, which rings around 2 a.m. You rise, shivering, from your pallet in the dormitory. There is no slow waking, no hitting the snooze button. You file down to the church with your brothers, your breath pluming in the frigid air, and you stand in the stark, candlelit choir to chant psalms for over an hour. This is the longest and most demanding of the night offices, a deliberate test of faith and discipline against the body's most basic needs. After matins, you might get a brief period of rest before lauds, the praise service, which greets the first hint of dawn. Only then does the true morning begin. This lifestyle required a specific, and rather grim, philosophy towards sleep. Monastic rules, like the famous rule of Saint Benedict, treated sleep as a necessary evil, a weakness of the flesh that had to be strictly controlled. Benedict allotted his monks a single, roughly 6 to 8 hour period for sleep, depending on the season, but it was fractured by these mandatory prayers. Sleep was for rejuvenating the body for God's work, nothing more. Excessive sleep was seen as a gateway to sloth, one of the 7 deadly sins, and to lascivious dreams. The quirky tidbit in this world of holy sleep deprivation involves the extreme measures some ascetics took to fight it. There are accounts of monks sleeping standing up in niches, or sitting on hard stools, to prevent themselves from falling into too deep a slumber. Some would keep their hands raised in prayer all night, or recite psalms until they literally collapsed from exhaustion. The goal was to transform the bed from a place of rest into an altar of perpetual vigilance. Historians still argue whether this monastic sleep schedule was a spiritually enlightened way to sanctify time or a form of institutionalized sleep deprivation that led to hallucinations, which were then often interpreted as divine visions. Did the chronic fatigue and fractured sleep patterns, combined with a low-grade diet and the power of suggestion, create the perfect conditions for what we would now call altered states of consciousness? It's a compelling debate. The monk, stumbling from his cold bed to the colder church, chanting in a sleep-deprived haze as the pre-dawn darkness presses against the windows, was in a liminal state, a prime candidate for a spiritual experience, whether genuine or self-induced. His night was not his own. It was a loan from God, payable in psalms, hymns, and a constant weary struggle to keep his eyes open and his soul alert. While you in your village home might be visited by a succubus, the monk in his choir stall was battling a far more insidious demon, the simple, overwhelming, and utterly human need to close his eyes and drift away. For centuries, this rhythm, the segmented sleep, the communal beds, the church bells cutting the night into holy segments, felt as permanent as the seasons. But a new kind of chime was coming, one that would not mark the hours for prayer, but for profit. The steady, unhurried pace of the pre-modern night, a time that belonged to demons, to dreams, and to private wakefulness, was about to be declared an enemy of progress. The age of artificial light and industrial time was dawning, and it was about to declare war on the way you sleep. The first cracks in the old order appeared with the widespread adoption of street lighting. It began in a few major cities in the 17th and 18th centuries, first with flickering oil lamps, then with the brighter, more terrifying glare of gaslight. This was a revolution as profound as the invention of the electric bulb later would be. The mainstream historical fact here is the transformative impact of public and domestic artificial lighting on nocturnal life. For the first time, the night could be tamed, pushed back, made safe for commerce and polite society. The dark, which had been a universal, democratic blanket covering everything, was now something you could fight. The wealthy could afford to extend their day with candles and oil lamps, reading, socializing, and working long after the sun had set, creating a new social divide. Those who owned the night, and those who were still owned by it. But the true death knell for medieval sleep was sounded by the factory. The Industrial Revolution didn't just change how things were made, it changed how human beings were used. The factory whistle replaced the monastery bell as the dictator of time, but its demands were far less forgiving. The machine required constant, unceasing attention. Its economics demanded shifts. The concept of a first and second sleep was a ridiculous, unaffordable luxury when the steam engine needed to be fed coal around the clock. Workers, including young children, were crammed into hastily built tenements, their sleep now a single, exhausted block of time stolen between the end of one grueling shift and the start of the next. This is the quirky, fringe tidbit of the industrial era, the rise of knocker-uppers, people hired for a pittance to tap on workers' windows with long poles to ensure they woke up in time for their shifts. It was a perversion of the communal sleep of old. Now, your neighbor wasn't just a source of snores, but a potential alarm clock in a human suit, ensuring you didn't oversleep and lose your meager wages. This new, consolidated 8-hour, if you were lucky, sleep was sold as efficiency, progress, and civilization. The old ways were branded as backward, lazy, and primitive. Medical and social texts from the 18th and 19th centuries began to pathologize waking up in the middle of the night, calling it a disorder. The very biological rhythm that had structured human life for millennia was now being diagnosed as a problem to be cured. Historians still argue whether this great sleep shift was an inevitable and necessary adaptation to the demands of an industrial world, or a profound and damaging rupture in human biology, one whose consequences, in terms of sleep disorders, stress, and the alienation of our waking from our natural rhythms, we are still grappling with today. And so, the world you knew, the world of the watch, of the sleepy posy, of the shared family bed and the fear of the mare, slowly faded. The night was conquered, lit up, and put on a schedule. The demons and the prophetic dreams were chased away by the gas lamp's hiss and the factory's roar. Sleep was no longer a mysterious, active journey through a dark and spiritual landscape. It was reduced to a commodity, a state of shutdown, a biological necessity to be efficiently managed so you could be a more productive cog in the machine the next day. The long, strange, communal, and terrifying night of the Middle Ages was over. A new, brighter, and in many ways, more exhausting era had begun. And so, we find ourselves here, in the silent glow of a screen, in a world the medieval mind could never have conceived. The demons that haunted their nights have been renamed. Stress, anxiety, the endless to-do list, but the feeling of a weight on the chest in the deep, dark hours can feel just as real. We've traded the straw mattress for memory foam, the sleepy posy for a melatonin gummy, the communal hall for the profound isolation of a private bedroom. We won the war against the darkness, flooding our world with so much light that we've forgotten what true, absolute night even looks like, and in doing so, we may have lost something essential in the quiet, wakeful space between our sleeps. Perhaps there's a strange comfort in knowing that your own fractured sleep, those moments when you find yourself staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., is not a malfunction, but an echo. A ghost in your own biological machine, a memory of the watch, when the world was slower, darker, and in some ways richer. It's a whisper from a time when the night was not a void to be feared or filled with noise, but a canvas for the soul, a time for soft conversations, for prayer, for simply being in the quiet company of your own thoughts or the steady breathing of loved ones nearby. There was a rhythm to it, acceptance of the dark as a part of life, not an enemy to be defeated. So the next time you awaken in that deep, still hour, don't immediately reach for the phone, flooding your eyes with blue light and the world's worries. Just for a moment, lie still. Listen to the hum of the fan, the modern equivalent of the hearth's last ember. Feel the weight of the blankets, your own version of the heavy bed curtains. In that quiet, you are connected to 1,000 years of human experience, to all the people who ever woke in the night and wondered, and waited, and listened to the silence before gently drifting back. The night doesn't have to be a battle for oblivion. It can be a harbor, a soft, dark, and peaceful space where time slows, and the only thing that matters is the gentle, steady rhythm of your breath, carrying you safely through the dark, all the way until the dawn.